Well, thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you all for being here. I think I want to start with your career. I mean, you have had an amazing and very inspirational career for all of us. I know you started as a professor in computer science, so very deeply rooted in computer science, and then you went on to Google in 2003, I think that was?
Yeah.
And then you went on to lead all of engineering for AdMob, which again got acquired by Google. And then, of course, you ran all of engineering and operations at LinkedIn. That's where I had the good fortune to learn and work with you, and we had so much fun. And when everything was going great, you decided to take on an entirely new role, which is the CTO of Microsoft, right? So,
Yep.
what really keeps you going, and what is it? What is the secret of your success, so that we can all learn and replicate it, maybe?
Good luck, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that drives me is curiosity, and it's like one of the reasons why I really love the job that I've got right now, because every day I go in and am confronted by like such a diversity of things that are both interesting and just like slightly beyond where my current expertise is at. And like I've always just sort of enjoyed challenges like that. I've always been most comfortable when I'm in a situation that threatens to make me very uncomfortable with just how sort of risky and like challenging the thing is going to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we all need to know when you're getting too comfortable, it's time to get uncomfortable, right? Like that's really the takeaway from this. So tell us a little bit more about your role at Microsoft. I mean, what does the CTO of Microsoft do? Like, what are the main responsibilities of a CTO at Microsoft?
Yeah, so my job basically has sort of two components. So like one is I try to help Satya and all of my peers on Satya's senior leadership team try to make sure that our broad technology strategy is the right one, and like part of that is making sure that we're thinking about the things that we need to be delivering over like the 3 to 5 year time horizon, and sort of thinking about like what are we not doing right now that we will come to regret if we haven't done it or invested enough in it right now, like in that 3 to 5 year time horizon. And like part of it is about just sort of at Microsoft scale, we have a bunch of engineering teams and researchers and folks who are doing like this incredible diversity of things, and it's very easy for folks who are like focused on like the particular thing that they're working on to like fail to see opportunities to collaborate and to like sort of build duplicative technology stacks. And I mean, like we worked a lot on this at LinkedIn, right? Where you sort of think like at LinkedIn at the like when I stepped aside, it was like 3,100 engineers, I think, and like Microsoft is, I don't know what the official number I can say in public is, like let's just call it more than 40,000 engineers. We it's you sort of think like oh my God, like that's enough to like solve every problem that you're going to face and that you need to tackle, but with a certain level of ambition, it starts to like feel like nowhere near enough, and so focus is always important, and leverage is always important, and like a lot of that even is about expertise, like some of the things that you're tackling, like building a quantum computer or like building machines that can train machine learning models at the very frontier of what's happening in AI, you really have a finite amount of expertise in any company that can go drive those really challenging things. And so like focus is super important, and that's part of my job.
Yeah, I remember when we were at LinkedIn, you used to have this weekly meeting where you'll get all the leaders in different organizations, and you will kind of encourage and almost force us, I would say, to think beyond what we were doing. So, I mean, and that was one of my favorite meetings to go to. So, so.
Well, that's good to hear. I don't know whether it was everyone's favorite meeting. But it's so we had the fortune at LinkedIn of working with this guy Fred Kaufman, and like
Right,
Fred
right.
is sort of this like weird combination of philosopher and economist, and is like one of the smartest people that I've ever worked with. And one of the things, so he was has a PhD from Berkeley in macroeconomics, and like went on to build this sort of very very successful consulting practice after being a professor at MIT. And one of the things that Fred would always remind people of is he sort of asked this question, like, in a soccer game, like, what's the job of the goalie? And like your first intuition is to say to keep the ball from going in the goal, and like the real answer is like to help your team win. And like most of the time it involves like keeping the ball from going in the goal, but like some of the times it means you have to get out of position to like do what needs to be done to like help you win the game. And like the same is true in any sort of company. Like most of the time you need to be focused on the thing that you're working on, and sometimes you got to get out of position to go solve a bigger problem, or to like try to hit this global optima that's like very challenging to try to hit. And that's the thing where you got to pull a bunch of people together. Like you have to have visibility across everything that's going on inside of your org, and you have to be willing to, again, get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love the Fred Kaufman's football analogy. So easy to understand, so difficult to do, right? So.
Yeah, very difficult to do.
So yeah, switching gears, like let's get to AI. So I know you are very passionate about this notion of what we call democratizing AI.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about what does democratizing AI really mean?
Well, I think you all who are here at this conference today have a pretty good idea of what like AI in general and machine learning in particular is increasingly able to accomplish. And when you just sort of imagine what's ahead of us over the next few years, it's not too much of a stretch to say that machine learning is going to have an enormous impact on the shape of the future of society. And like if you believe that it's going to be one of these sort of foundational things sort of directing the course of the future, then I think it's unbelievably important that you think about the platforms that you're building for AI and making sure that everyone has access to those platforms so that they can use the techniques of AI to enhance their own creativity, to like build their own businesses, to do their jobs inside of the companies that they work for. Like I think about it a lot as sort of analogous to what happened in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, where you had you had a little bit of industrial revolution happening in the late 18th century, and then the steam engine arrives and like becomes this like thing that massively changes the nature of productivity, because it can do this broad new set of things that hitherto only human beings and horses and mules and sort of like very, very sort of physical labor had to do. It was like this brand new powerful machine. And if you look at like the early unfolding of the Industrial Revolution, the people who mostly benefited from this technology were folks who had the capital to like build factories and businesses around the machines, and people who had expertise to design, build, and operate them. But eventually, like over like very long periods of time, the technology democratized. Like you don't get any sort of advantage now, as a capital owner because you can build an engine. And what we, I think, need to do with AI right now is sort of try to dramatically contract that period of time where, AI is so hard to do that only a handful of people can do it. Like we have to like constantly be pushing to make it more open, and like that's really what I mean when I say democratizing. It like has to be a level playing field. Like you have to have not just thousands or tens of thousands, but like millions or tens of millions of people in a very short period of time, like using this new bag of tricks that we have to do their job. And like we probably have 40 million professional developers in the world. Like all 40 million of those professional developers need to be conversant with machine learning, and just like they can pass an interview, where they can do a linked list implementation. They know what a, dictionary is and can analyze its complexity. Like, you need to be able to reason about machine learning and have that in your bag of tricks. But like, I think it even needs to expand beyond that.
So that's great. That's very interesting. So, I mean, I think for the benefit of our audience, like what really makes machine learning hard, right? So it seems like there is some inherent difficulty in the process which really makes it not accessible. But like if someone reads a textbook in machine learning, other than the math, is it the math that's hard, or what is hard about machine learning?
Well, look, I think, the thing that, again, like probably folks in the audience realize it's actually easier now than it was a while ago. You've been doing machine learning for like a while, like what, 15, 20
years, yeah.
Like my first machine learning work was at Google in 2004, I think. So it's like 15 years. And like what you can do now versus what you could do 15 years ago is fundamentally different. Like I remember sitting down, with this like big yellow, elements of statistical machine learning was like I'd been a compiler and programming language guy before I went to Google, and so like I'm sitting here at this book, and then, the math is like non-trivial. Like it is like one of those things that makes it less approachable. But you can do a ton now without having to like be able to digest that entire book. We have really powerful frameworks, like we've got cloud tools, we've got all of this goodness that's happening in open source, and like I think a lot of the difficulty now with machine learning, like particularly supervised machine learning, where part of the task is like having to have access to a large enough corpus of data that has been labeled for the specific task that you're trying to train the ML algorithm to accomplish. Like that's just sort of a tedious and expensive thing, and so I think that's one of the daunting things for folks who like don't have massive scales of data or don't have lots and lots of money or like a business model that lets you pay for, sort of data labeling at scale. But like there's very interesting, good stuff on the horizon. So transfer learning and machine teaching and like a bunch of the stuff that's happening now with reinforcement learning and unsupervised learning for natural language processing. Like there's just this sort of shift that's been happening like slowly over the past couple of years, but like with increasing rapidity where that constraint of data labeling is going to go away, and then the hard thing is going to be like, how do you have access to enough compute to train models at the scale that they're at?
Got it. That's fascinating. I mean, I think. So what is? Tell us a little bit about what Microsoft is doing to kind of help the world in this area. I know doing a ton of things, so it would be great if you can give us a high-level overview of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, and again, we sort of think about the audience for whom we're building machine learning tools is very broad. It's broader even than the world of professional software developers. But so like the world of professional software developers is sort of where you start. So how do you build things like Azure Machine Learning and like the sort of the frameworks that we're building to help people very quickly do the sorts of machine learning that we know for sure can benefit them in the work that they're doing. Like there's a big investment in that. There's a big investment on the other end of that of like, arguably like everybody who can write an Excel macro is like some flavor of programmer, and like we shouldn't underestimate the power that like giving people the way to automate like spreadsheet calculations like was a transformative thing many years ago. And so like there's sort of equivalent.
It's still transformative, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Like lots and lots of people use Excel a lot. But the thing that you want to be able to do is to provide hooks into machine learning that are sort of that equivalent. So like we've got a bunch of work that we've done in Microsoft Research on AutoML, which are machine learning systems that can help you build other machine learning systems that are connected to Azure ML, which is sort of a developer and data scientist platform, but also like the same underlying infrastructure is powering a bunch of stuff now in Power BI, which is a business intelligence and analytics tool. And so like you can go into Power BI and like build relatively sophisticated regression and classification models without actually having to know what a random decision tree is, or like how to do a training run and like hyperparameter sweeps and all of that. Like the system just sort of takes care of that for you. And then on the other end, like where we sort of think about where the frontier of AI is. We have an enormous investment in both the infrastructure for building like very large scale models that like we feel it is part of our duty and responsibility to build that and to make sure that like those advances that we're making on compute infrastructure, for instance, are going to sort of roll out to very broad audiences of people. Like we've got folks at Microsoft Research who are sort of advancing the state of the art, like folks in your team at LinkedIn who are like very active in the research community and trying to like have an open dialogue about where machine learning is going. And like we also have a big investment that we're making in like how do you think about the ethical principles that like all of this AI work needs to stand on top of.
Yeah, so speaking of ethics, I mean that's a great point. Like as we are making machine learning and AI accessible, we'll be all living in a world where we'll have devices, connected devices becoming more intelligent, having intelligent conversations on our behalf and making us more efficient. But as we all know, there are always going to be some bad actors, and it becomes extremely important to practice this art or science, whatever you call it, in a strong ethical framework. So we know Microsoft has been really leading the discussion in that area and kind of influencing the rest of the world in how we should think about it.
Yep.
Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a bunch of our time thinking about it. In fact, like we just on Friday, like we had a big review with the team inside of the company. It's called Ether, our AI Ethics and Responsibility Board. And so it's a cross-functional group from across legal, our engineering groups, research, and like they've done some really good work that has informed a bunch of stuff that we're talking about in public. And like there's this, like I'm strongly encouraging the team to like take more of what they're doing to like help produce this ethical foundation for the tens of thousands of engineers at Microsoft to like make that openly available to the public. But what it boils down to is we have these 6 like pillars that we believe are important for AI development. So there's fairness, there's inclusiveness and diversity. There is reliability and safety. There's transparency. There's privacy and security, and there's accountability. And like we could spend hours chatting about each one of those pillars, and like there's just a lot to say about each of them, and like how that translates into public action. Like one of the things that we've done is like we believe that like we must have regulation of how facial recognition technology works, for instance, because it is not sufficient for individual companies to like try to figure out like what a like company-specific regulatory regime looks like. And I think this is like one of the important things. Like even though we have these 6 pillars that we're thinking about with AI ethics, like it really very much needs to be a public conversation. Like we live in a democracy, like we need everyone's voice to be heard. Like everyone needs to like feel like they are able to like understand enough of this whole AI debate that they can have a voice in like how the like ethical foundations of AI are shaping up. And like part of the thing with facial recognition is like it's this very urgent problem. Like the technology is mature enough that people are beginning to use it to do a whole bunch of things, and like we need the democratic processes of the free countries of the world to weigh in and sort of say like this is what we believe is reasonable use of these technologies. Like very, very, very important.
Yeah, that's so. You mentioned something that was interesting. You said like in order to kind of make advances in this, we need to have public debate. But a public debate can only begin with awareness. And I mean, given this is still an esoteric science, and I know we are Microsoft has been doing a lot of work in terms of making it accessible, not just by building tooling, but also by educating. So how do we make this thing more accessible in terms of knowledge to the broader public so that we can all engage in a public debate? Because there's no point in having a public debate if we don't really understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the good thing that's happening right now is there is an increasingly large volume of public debate. Like we have folks, like I'm sure many of the people in this room who are asking the, sort of the tough questions that need to be asked about like AI's development and like what it means for our collective future. And like there's a ton of stuff. Like I personally care a lot about this. Like I am like on the ride up here. I was doing the final tune-up for a manuscript for a book that I've written about this. It's about to get submitted and be published next April about like this whole complicated bag of issues. So I think like the responsibility that everybody who is actively developing machine learning technologies, like our responsibility is to like not just focus on the technical thing that we're trying to do, but to like actually engage in this public debate. Like it's no longer good, like you can't just talk to your machine learning buddies about what you're doing. You can no longer just talk to your, your tech industry friends about what you're doing, although that's important. You have to use this unique perspective that you have because like you're one of the folks in the trenches to like try to like positively engage in a public dialogue about this. It's like super important.
So Kevin, you have a big job, CTO at Microsoft. I know you are involved in doing a lot of charity work. You are mentoring so many people, and I don't know how you found the time to write a book. So I'm now curious. I didn't know you're writing a book. So can you tell us more about your book?
Yeah, I would not recommend trying to be a CTO of a company and writing a book in your spare time. Like we'll see whether it's a good book or not. You all will have to decide that. But like trying to like put in like a level of effort to like get a book done, it's meant that I've had to like borrow cycles from Microsoft, and I've had to borrow cycles from my family, which is like the most unfortunate thing. Like I spent a week in Maui, which is great. Like who gets to spend a week in Maui?
Well, now the book has to be good, right? Like
yeah, so it was like better than many alternatives. But like like while my kids were playing on the beach, I was sitting in a like small hotel room, like hunched over a laptop, like trying to pound out the next 5,000 words on this thing. So anyway, like the book is called Reprogramming the American Dream, and it is basically a call to action for all of us in the tech industry, for policymakers, for investors and executives, trying to sort of outline like a set of things that I think we need to do in order to like make AI like one of these like foundational technologies for the future that benefits everyone and the public good, like not just sort of a narrowly focused set of things that like sometimes I think we get a little bit myopic, and like the particular technology or the particular application of the technology seems like the only thing that matters, when really like the thing that matters is like we have this thing that is unprecedented in terms of its power. Like it literally is, like technology in general, and I think AI in particular, is like one of the very few things that can take some of these very contentious zero-sum problems that that we're grappling with right now, like access to healthcare, or like the balance of things that you have to do to combat climate change, or like how you deal with the big demographic shifts that we are having in the global population right now, where like most of the working age people right now are going to like age out of the workforce over the next 3 or 4 decades, and like the population that's coming in behind them isn't as big, which means that you have big questions to answer, like who's going to take care of all the old people, and like who does all of the work, and so like technology can play a a pivotal role in turning some of these zero-sum games into non-zero-sum ones, where it creates abundance that we don't have right now. It relaxes constraints that we have that are making these problems too hard to solve. And like, we just sort of have to choose to invest right now. And like, the choice is ours collectively.
So Kevin, I know we can keep doing this for hours, but I think we are running out of time. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy, so thanks to Kevin for doing this.
Thank you.